Hello there, beautiful beings. Welcome back to the Starseed Network podcast. I'm your host and personal spirit guide, Saule Ilona Vaida, bringing you with me on this journey of exploring our spiritual and human experience on Earth, speaking to incredible light workers, creators, artists, and starseeds all around the world, and exploring our collective ascension process. As always, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Your presence, your attention, your time is so valued and appreciated. And make sure, if you're enjoying the podcast, leave us a positive rating and review. Share with someone who might resonate. Tag us on Instagram at the Starseed Network at Saule the Starseed. And thank you so much for being here. So today I'm really excited to be joined by an incredible woman, Julie Hoyle, who is sharing about her radical awakening experience, how she's been holding the light for many, many years now and paving the way essentially for all of these almost, normalization and frequencies that we have so available to us on Earth now. So it's really incredible to talk to people who are from a different generation, who were anchoring in and holding these codes in, these previous waves, these earlier waves that have actually created such a profound and fertile land for us now, as in our generation of starseeds, to this third wave, this younger generation, to really pick up the reins and pick up and continue on this work. So Julie has her own podcast on YouTube where called Talking True with Julie Hoyle, where I also interviewed she interviewed me on her podcast, which is going to be available in the link below as well if you want to have a listen to that interview. It was such a lovely experience connecting with her, and she was so kind as to come on to this podcast as well. And we are talking about her awakening experience. She offers sessions. She is an art teacher, probably the best art teacher you'd want to have as your art teacher. And she is creating her own show out here on YouTube. So I'm so excited for you guys to take in this interview, and I hope you enjoy. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to hear about your story and hear about your awakening process and everything that you've been living and embodying. And I would just love for you to share from wherever you feel like beginning, what your awakening process has been.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me. This is a real honor and a pleasure. Mm-hmm. And I do love to share, because stories just make everything more accessible for people, I think, especially when they're going through the awakening process.
Yes.
So just for context, I'm going to start from when I was really, really young. I mean, as young as I can possibly remember. I was having lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences, angelic visitations, and also visitations from deceased loved ones. So I became very aware that there was more to life than, what was presented kind of in this through the body, and, what we're being told about who we are and all of those things. And so that went on for many, many years, and psychic gifts were clearly evident, in me as a child. And I sort of naturally assumed that was true for everybody else. And then when I started speaking about these things, I realized that wasn't true. And, people that I spoke with in my kind of immediate environment weren't having the same kinds of life experiences, So I learned to keep quiet. And then when I was about 14, I think, around that time, I felt like the psychic gifts and this psychic phenomenon that was part of my life was too weighty for me because I didn't know what to do with it because I couldn't talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
And so I looked up at the sky and said, God, please take this away. Because I wanted to be a normal teenager. So anyway, all of that disappeared. And then fast forward to when I was in my early 30s, I was married and my husband and I had, moved to the Bahamas. We've been here, I think, for about, 8 or 9 years or something like that.
Wow.
And we were meant to be living the dream, but I just felt discontent because I was always looking for someone who I felt could reflect back to me what I'd experienced as a child. I was looking for somebody that could kind of validate all of that. Not that I needed validation, I didn't, but I felt I needed company. I was looking for people of like mind who could, help. I could have conversations with. And I really couldn't find anybody. It was really frustrating. So there was all of that going on in the background. And then what happened is I started to develop a very painful back condition that I discovered was 2 bulging discs. And it left me, and if anybody who's listening has had back problems, you know what the pain is like. It's really intense. So I was on bed rest for close to 2 months. And during that time, my grandmother, who had deceased many years before, came to me in a lucid dream and she said to me, pray, you must pray. So I did what she said, because I was desperate. So I started to pray, and the way I prayed it was very sort of transactional. I prayed to God and said, God, please help me with this back condition. If you can heal this back condition, then I promise I'll start going to church. So literally, as soon as that prayer was offered, amazing things started to happen. For example, there was a knock on the door one day. I opened the door and it was this woman who said she was a friend of a friend and she'd heard I had back problems. And she was a Reiki healer and she did energy work and she was offering me a free energy healing. So I said yes. And I did a transaction. I gave her some of my paintings. I did silk paintings at the time. So we did this lovely exchange. She did Reiki healing on me. She came for 2 or 3 sessions and I started to feel better almost immediately.
Wow.
And so to cut a long story short, as things started to pick up. I was able to function and move and, go back to work and all of those things. I started going to church. And then a few weeks after that, I heard about a meditation group that was happening literally less than half a mile from where I lived. And I had always wanted to meditate. So I thought, okay, let me go along and see what this meditation's about. And I had a feeling it would help with the back condition because I didn't want it to come back. So anyway, I went to this meditation group. The people were lovely, professional people, and that was important to me rather than kind of kooky people. I know it sounds kind of shallow, but that was where I was at back then. Anyway, so I went along, and it was held every Wednesday from 8 o'clock till 9:30 or something like that. So I went for 2 weeks. Or 3 weeks, I forget now, but I just couldn't meditate, even though the meditations were only 20 minutes long. My mind just wouldn't keep still. So what I would do is I'd open my eyes, look around the room and think to myself, how is he able to, or she able to sit there and look so content? I really, and if anybody's struggled with meditation, I'm sure they can relate. But it was like everything inside of me was rebelling. I wanted to get up and run, is how I felt. It was so strong.
Yeah.
So I was trying to contain myself. So I went, 2 or 3 times. And then after the 3rd failed attempt, I was driving home and I thought, okay, I've tried meditation, but it doesn't work for me. And, they were nice people, but I'm not going back. That's it. I'm done. And then that night I had a lucid dream where, and if viewers don't know what a lucid dream is, it's when you wake up in your dream and you realize this is a dream and I am dreaming. So you become conscious in your dream. So in this dream, I was in a rural setting that even though I've never been to India, it felt like India. And I was walking up this kind of dusty path towards a low cinder block building. It was on top of the hill. And I was with about 10 or 15 people. I was carrying a yoga mat under my arm. And there was a woman walking with me who I had just met at the meditation group the night before. So we were walking towards this building. We walk in the back of the building, and I look to the front, and inside on this low tucket, this wooden tucket, is a yogi. He's like a big Buddha. He has a massive, big round belly. He's wearing a white loincloth. He's sitting there with his eyes closed and his legs crossed. And the minute my eyes laid on him, I knew he was the being that I had been searching for my entire life. And everything within me just bowed down in front of him. And just for context, I was raised a Catholic. I had no kind of understanding of anything to do with yoga or, any of the processes of yoga or anything. So anyway, we're inside the room. This lady who's with me said, unroll your mat and lay down. So I did. And I lay there for a couple of seconds, and she said, repeat the mantra. So I had been taught this mantra during the meditation sessions, which is Om Namah Shivaya. Om is the primordial sound. Namah means I bow to. And Shiva or Shivaya is supreme consciousness itself. So you're actually saying, I bow to supreme consciousness, or I bow to my own higher self, right? So I started silently repeating the mantra, and I think I repeated it maybe 2 or 3 times. And then I felt this light tap on the top of my head. And I knew that the great being on this platform, without moving a muscle, had directed his energy, and he tapped the top of my head, and he was awakening something within me. So from that tap, I felt this incredible force, this incredible power pouring through my crown chakra and into every cell of my body.
Wow.
And that energy started to vibrate and pulsate at an increasingly intense level. And the more I repeated the mantra, the stronger this energy became. And I started to kind of levitate. My whole body started to lift up. And I knew that if I kept repeating the mantra, and just stayed with the mantra, repeating it, I could hold the energy. And so I did that for several minutes. But as the energy became more and more intense, I started to feel like I cannot hold this anymore. And then I started to smell burning. It was like my electrical circuits were burning out.
Wow.
And at the point where I felt like I couldn't hold it anymore, I felt myself crashing down. And then I fell through time and space. I landed, my subtle body, my soul, landed into my physical body through the heart chakra. And I landed with such force, my physical body sat up in bed. And I recognized as this was happening that my physical body had not been breathing. Somehow there'd been like this slowing down of the breath and a cessation of the breathing process. So what happened was I sat up in bed, and there was this great gasp. It went like this as I pulled this air into my body. And it was such a loud, forceful sound. My husband woke up and he said, what happened? He was scared. He said, what happened? And I said to him, I don't know, but my life will never be the same again. And those words proved to be prophetic, because I didn't know what had happened actually. But, I was filled with the most profound, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I started cleaning the place and going crazy, and, I was mopping the floor, just doing this whole purge inside the house. And then a few hours later, it was time to go to work. And I was driving to work, and I was having to pull over on the side of the road because I would just start sobbing.
Wow.
And then that would pass, and then I'd start laughing hysterically. So I knew something wild was happening to me. I just didn't know what it was. So I get to work, and by profession, I'm an art and design teacher. So I was at that time teaching, the first thing in the morning, I was teaching a grade 10 class of boys. And they used to love art, and they used to kind of run up to the art room and, be very excited. So one of them said to me, Mrs. Hoyle, you need to go and get a new pair of shoes, because they have a shoe sale at a shoe store called Mike's, not far from where the school was. He said, you should go. And I was like, okay, thank you, I'll go. And then I kept getting the message like 2 or 3 times. People were saying the same thing. So I thought to myself, I have to listen, because when a message is given 3 times, it means something. So I just happened to have some time just after lunch. I wasn't teaching a class, and I had my lunch period. So I drove out to this store, this Mike's shoe store, and went in there, and there was nothing there. And I thought to myself, oh, there's a Unity Church across the road. Let me go there. Let me go visit there. I know the bookstore's open. Maybe there'll be a book there that explains what happened to me last night. So I go inside the bookstore, and I'm looking at the shelves and trying to find something, and I couldn't find anything. But I felt this person coming in the bookstore behind me, and I turned around, and it was Cheryl, this woman that was in my dream from the night before.
Wow.
And I said, oh my God, Cheryl, I had this dream about you last night. And I told her, and she said, oh my God, that's so profound. You've received SHAKTIPAT. And I was like, what? What's that? She said, come to my house later this afternoon, and I'll explain what it is, And she said, I just want you to know, I haven't been in this bookstore for at least 5 years, but I got a strong message to come here today, and here you are.
Wow.
So anyway, later that day, I went to Cheryl's house and told her dream in detail. And she said, wait a minute. So she went into her bedroom, pulled a book out from her shelf, and gave it to me. And it was a book called Play of Consciousness by Swami Muktananda. And he was a Shaktipat guru. He used to give initiation to awaken the kundalini. And when I opened the book and looked inside, there was a picture of the great being I'd seen in my dream the night before. And his name is Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri. And he is renowned in India for giving initiation and for awakening the kundalini Shakti in spiritual seekers. And I said to Cheryl, oh my God, this is the man who was in my dream last night. And so she was like, oh my God, he was a born avadut. He was born realized. He's recognized in India. He's revered in India. He's like the grandfather of the whole Siddha lineage, the great beings who give Shaktipat. You're incredibly blessed. And so that was really the beginning or the reigniting, I should say, I suppose, of all the gifts I came into the world with. And then what happened is after Bhagavan Nityananda gave me initiation, it was like the lid was blown off completely. And I started having these profound lucid dreams with great beings who would give me more initiations and teachings and sort of purification processes, and they ranged from, in the yogic tradition. There were many from the yogic tradition. Swami Ram Tirth was one of them, Ananda Mayima was another one. Ramakrishna Paramahansa was another. I mean, there's a long list. And then also His Holiness the Dalai Lama kept appearing, and I've never studied Buddhism in my life. And he would appear in dreams, lucid dreams. He would give me teachings about different forms of meditation. And he would give me teachings about the heart chakra and about being guided in a guide, listening to and acting on inner guidance. And then there were also initiations and teachings from Sufi masters and Native American great beings, and just beings from every path, faith, and tradition that you could imagine. So I would have these lucid dream meetings, and they would speak to me and give me initiation, and then I'd say, "Can you please tell me your name?" And they would tell me their name, and then when I would come out, from the dream and into waking, I'd then go and do research to find out who they were. So this went on for years and years and years. It still does. Not to the same level of intensity as they did, as it did when it first happened. Because what happens now is I hear them in the subtle realm. I hear them in the waking state, and I receive messages and initiations that way. So don't have to be in the dream state. It's more subtle. And of course, when all of that started happening, I had no clue that I'd be doing the work I'm doing now. In terms of, doing interviews and hosting my YouTube channel and doing, working with clients one-on-one and doing readings and helping people with shadow work and all of those things. But all of that said, it really helped having all of those dream meetings with these great beings, because I can essentially speak to anybody from any path, faith, and tradition, and there's a commonality, because I understand the belief system and often the structure around that and what that looks like. And so I can work with people on a subtle level. So it's been the most incredible process, journey, call it whatever you want. But it's been the most amazing thing. And I do want to say as well, what happened was my husband and I were invited to go to India to go on staff at an ashram, the ashram that is linked with Bhagavan Nityananda's kind of lineage. And we were invited to go there for a period of time. But, I'd never been to India before. But when we landed in India and I stepped out of the airport and stood, outside, it was like this absolute recognition that I had lived in India before. I knew it was home. It was like my heart just exploded, and I was just so happy to be back in this place. So all I can think and feel is that I had a former lifetime with Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri. And he did once tell me that he had called me to him to finish the work that was started before.
Yes.
So, but, even then, it just amazes me that, I was raised in the UK in a working class family, fairly poor family, actually, with a Catholic father, an agnostic mother, nobody interested in anything to do with spirituality or yoga or anything. And here was me from the earliest age of ever remembering anything, having this longing to find someone. I couldn't have even articulated it, but that came with me, So, and it's been the driving force in my life, and never in a million years did I ever imagine that I would be doing the work I'm doing now, because I was always shy as a child, very contemplative, kind of withdrawn, I suppose, and yet here we are.
Wow! That story is so epic, and wow, that is just all so divinely guided. All just comes together And that's so fascinating. Yeah, because our soul just chooses all these different lifetimes and countries and bodies and time periods to incarnate into. So it's so amazing to be able to hold the witness of, this lifetime and the other ones where you've, been initiated and activated in other lands and continuing this work here now. And that's so fascinating. And yeah, I totally empathize with, feeling that difference. You're physically in one place, but you know that you're coming from somewhere else completely different, or you're going somewhere else different. And yeah, that's so fascinating. Have you kind of how did you kind of, integrate and, merge these worlds, all of these different worlds into your being on a day-to-day basis, kind of balancing being in the physical world and this amazing astral world? How was that for you? How was that process?
It's been challenging. And again, for context, let me just say that as a child, I think I must have been at least 7 or 8, quite old, before I learned to tell time, because I couldn't fathom time. Because to me, time was always fluid. And so there was just trying to figure out how to tell time was almost impossible. And I do have a clear memory of my mother. She went out and bought this kind of a little clock, with the hands that you move around like on a card or something. And she was sitting with me trying to explain what 12:30 was and 12:45 and, all of those things. And I just couldn't get it. And as a consequence, I felt really stupid. And I know the teacher I had there at the school I was at was very frustrated as well. And I just later on, I kept thinking, it's probably because I'm not good at math. I'm not good with numbers and all of those things. And it wasn't until later in life and post having this awakening that I began to recognize that it wasn't that at all. It was just that I understood that time was just a man-made construct and it wasn't real. And that's always how I'd lived my life. So ironically, here's the joke. Here's the kind of cosmic joke with all of that, which is that from very, very early on, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I had to be a teacher. So I trained, I went to teacher training college. I did my degree and all of those things. And when I came to the Bahamas, I was and I still teach. I still teach in a high school. I teach art and design and stuff. But I would always laugh because I've existed outside of time since I was a child and never really understood it. And here I am in a profession that is dictated by time. I mean, you have to watch the clock all day long. And all of that was many times. Now it's fine. I'm okay with it. But certainly early on, it was just so painful for me to have to try and constrain and contain myself within the limitations of time, and to be able to function in that when I knew who I was beyond time. And so from that perspective, it's been challenging. And then also being in a system that really elevates and puts the mind on a pedestal and relegates heart wisdom and intuition to some place that's in the basement, so to speak. So essentially everything that I do is always heart-centered, and it's always intuitive, and it's always creating safe spaces for students to be able to connect in with what feels real for them. So when they say, what color should I paint the background, or what should I do? I'll say, I don't know. What do you think? What feels right for you? And so that's been my way of rebelling against the confines and obviously you honor the mind, you honor the kind of rigors of the academics and so on and so forth, and all of that has its place. But a much bigger job for me since I first started teaching was about creating this space where students can connect in with source or self or whatever you want to call that, with respect to their own intuitive knowing and connecting into God. Again, whatever that looks like for them or their belief system, and just moving into this timeless truth of who they are.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And wow, yeah, that just so reminds me of kind of the concepts of, loving, humble, divine service. And it's so wonderful to see that, you embodying all these divine principles and translating it into the lives of young people, which is so impactful. And
yes. And look, the thing that it took me a long time to realize, and it's probably a good thing I didn't realize it, because then the ego would want to sort of take charge. But what I started to notice maybe 15, 20 years ago was that even though I'm not talking about awakening, chakras, energy, out of body experiences, or anything to do with one's awakening, so to speak, the transmission of the energy within my own awakening was having an effect, and still has an effect, right? Because what happens is, even if you're not speaking about your awakening, or what you've been kind of working through or whatever, your state speaks for you. It speaks on your behalf. There's an energetic transmission that happens. And so what began to be revealed was that, even though I wasn't using that language, and I really wouldn't, because especially when I first started teaching in the Bahamas in the 80s, these schools are very kind of Christian and Orthodox Christian kind of settings, and so on and so forth. So I was very mindful of that. So I wouldn't use yogic language. And I would use language that was accessible to the students I was teaching. But even if I wasn't speaking about anything to do with God or Jesus or any of those things, their work would show imagery that reflected the light of their own being and the light of their own awakening. And I would also have students coming in, and again, the Christian environment, they would come in with that, putting their hands together in pranam, and they would go, like this. And then many times they would say, can we come in at lunchtime to eat our lunch inside the art room, because my spirit feels good in here. I feel peace in here. And then another time a boy was cleaning a board and he was going, oh, now that om is absolutely outside of their lexicon when it comes to the articulation of what they're feeling inside. So I knew that, and I was the whole time I would be repeat, and I still do. I do japa, which is a mental repetition of a mantra, and it's always Om Namah Shivaya, because that was the mantra I was given in terms of the awakening. So that's going on all the time. And more recently, I'd say over the last 15 years or 10 years or so, I've seen peacock feathers and om signs and dream catchers and hamsa signs and things like motifs in our artwork that students are creating. And they're investigating and exploring other realms of being. And they will often be the ones that bring their work and want to initiate conversations around what they're seeing and perceiving. So again, there's a transmission, and there's a shift of consciousness within the students that I'm serving. And it's also true within the staff too, because staff will come and open up and say things to me or ask questions. And I don't sit down talking about my awakening to everybody, because sometimes it's just not appropriate. But by virtue of what they're saying, there's a recognition that there's a transmission and there's a shift. And there's a desire to know more.
Wow. Yes, that is so beautiful and so real, and so just, very grounded. And it's very beautiful to see that perspective. I think, a lot of the times in modern spirituality, we can get lost in a little bit of the awakening part and then don't ground ourselves in to, continue like functioning in society or continue. And of course, everyone's journey and everyone's mission is different. But it's beautiful to see kind of another, perspective of how we can navigate, this 3D world while holding the frequency without, needing to get everyone on their team or something, or, spread the word, but just by embodiment, it makes that impact.
Yes, and not proselytize. You just that space. And all of that said too, that especially when I'd had a really intense and powerful lucid dream experience with a great being, who'd given me initiation, whatever, it would be hard sometimes to come out of that and get showered and ready and go off to work.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then I went through a phase where I had to do shadow work because in order to be able to transmit, hold, and contain the light of the self, you really have to do the work on the shadow, one's psychological, conditioning and so on and so forth. Because if you don't do that work, there'll be reluctance and an unwillingness to allow yourself to become the container for the light. And so shadow work's really integral to that. So there was a period when I was doing intense shadow work, which wasn't easy, especially when you're working and you're dealing with challenges on a day-to-day basis and all of those things. But it was incredibly powerful and very necessary, because if you don't do that, then the spiritualized ego can very easily slip in and want to take credit for everything that's happening.
Yes.
So that works. That's what. So I've done a few little classes and exercises with my students to help them understand what the shadow is, well, because that's very helpful for them going forward into their lives too. And we've done a few things like that. And we've worked on mandalas and dream catchers and stuff like that, just as a fun projects. And they really get a lot of meaning and benefit from doing that work.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Wonderful. So it's true of all of us. We are, everyone is a container for source itself. You and I are the self in the embodied form.
Yes.
And when I say the self, I mean the higher self, obviously. And it's just a case of getting the small I out of the way to allow the self to speak for itself and do the work of awakening and transmitting this energy. And then it just happens naturally. Like you with your chanting, you have to get out of the way in order for the sort of the transmission to happen effortlessly. You can't do your work if you're sitting in ego saying, I'm so fantastic, I have such an amazing voice, I need to get the big crowd, right? Or whatever the story might be. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. And also like the other side of that ego that's like, I'm so unworthy, I can't show myself, I need to be small. Like that's just as much ego as the over the top, like grandiosity.
Yes, exactly. And that can be a stumbling point. Who am I to do this? Who am I to do that? I'm not ready yet. And that, what I always say to people is just trust the not readiness or the unreadiness. Trust the not knowing, because the not knowing will guide you. And you'll never be left flailing around not knowing what to do. As soon as you get out of the way in terms of the small I, then source can speak through you.
Yeah.
And that's when the magic happens, as you know, as I know, as we all know.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this beautifully inspiring story. And if there's anything else that you might feel to share with the audience, anything that's coming through you.
Yes, what I'd love to share is that I have a YouTube channel where it's called Talking True with Julie Hoyle. And I'm having the best time. Seriously, I just feel so honored. And just to give context, I was guided, I was told by the great being who gave me initiation in the first place to create a series where I'm talking to people who are going through awakenings, who have had near-death experiences, people who are healers, or people who, offer their voice in terms of, like you do, sound healing. So I've started a series where I'm interviewing people, as I say, ordinary people having extraordinary experiences of awakenings. And so I would invite anybody who enjoys this podcast to check it out, because it's just been really amazing, and people are connecting in and listening and enjoying the content. And then if anybody wants to find me, I'm on Instagram at Julie Hoyle Official. And I have a website, juliehoyle.org. So people can reach out and find me there too. And but certainly stop by the YouTube channel, because it's been really very inspiring.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're so welcome.
Your presence and your heart and all this beautiful radiance.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing as well. It's just so beautiful, and there's a need for it.
Thank you. Yes, we're all so rapidly expanding. It's great to have a little home and container for all that.
Yes, it really is. So thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am going to link below where you can find Julie on her Instagram, her YouTube channel with her podcast, and make sure to give her a follow and stay up to date with her work. And as always, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm wishing you all a beautiful morning, evening, noon, and night, wherever you are in this beautiful world, and take sweet care of yourselves. Each morning, I'm beautiful and worthy. I'm safe and truly deserving. Speak it into existence and release your resistance. Speak it into existence and release your resistance. Wake up, rise up. Wake up, rise up. Wake up, rise up. Wake up, rise up and greet the sun. I'm grateful for another one. Abundance gathers like fields of flowers, grown with my two hands and tears they showered. Meditating, congregating with my soul's truth, elevating, speaking to existence and release your resistance. That I wanna make, serve the world in my true way. Gonna be rich, I'm gonna be funny, gonna be proud of what becoming. Make the things that I wanna make, serve the world in my true way. Speak it into